On February 28, 2026, a conflict that had been simmering for years finally boiled over, erupting into a full-blown global crisis. So today, we're going to break down how this war in Iran managed to shake the entire world, what exactly led to the fighting, and, maybe most importantly, where things stand right now.
This wasn't some distant war you just read about online. Nope, this was a conflict that immediately hit everyone's wallet, and it really exposed just how fragile our interconnected world actually is. So, the big question we're tackling today is this: how on earth did a regional conflict manage to bring the global economy to its knees in just over a month?
Well, the first and most immediate answer was oil. I mean, just look at these numbers. Before the war, you were looking at about $70 for a barrel of crude oil. Within a single month, that price skyrocketed to over $119. This was the biggest shock to the oil supply since the 1970s, and it was a really painful first sign of the conflict's massive price tag. And that economic shock? It's a huge reason why the world is watching what happens next so closely.
So, where do things stand today? Well, the shooting is stopped, for now. But the tension? That's another story. Let's take a look at the current situation on the ground.
Okay, so as of April 8th, there's a temporary ceasefire in place. But peace is an incredibly fragile word right now. The world's single most important oil choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, is basically a ghost town. It's operating at just 10% of its normal traffic. It really feels like the entire global economy is just holding its breath.
And here's why that peace is so fragile. The negotiators are facing a massive chasm of conflicting demands. On one side, you have the US and Israel. Their bottom line: Iran has to halt all uranium enrichment, which they see as an existential threat, and completely cut off support for its regional proxies. But on the other side, Iran is demanding an end to all sanctions, compensation for war damages, and critically, recognition of its right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. The key thing to understand here is that these aren't just minor disagreements. They are fundamental conflicts over power, security, and national sovereignty.
So how did we even get to this incredibly tense standoff? To really understand that, we've got to rewind the clock just a few months and look at the lightning-fast path to war.
Things move so fast. It really kicked off in late 2025 with massive anti-government protests across Iran. Then, in January, the U.S. threatened military action and started a major military buildup in the region. But even as things got hotter, there were these high-stakes nuclear talks going on in February. In fact, just one day before the attack, officials in Oman were claiming a diplomatic breakthrough was just around the corner. And then, on February 28th, the strikes began.
This right here really underscores the tragedy of the whole thing. Just 3 days before the war started, Iran's own foreign minister claimed a historic agreement to prevent a conflict was within reach. It is just a stunning, heartbreaking reminder of how close the world came to a very, very different outcome.
But that diplomatic path just vanished overnight. The conflict, which kicked off on the very first day of Ramadan, exploded with an intensity that just shocked the world.
The opening move was completely unprecedented. On day one, a coordinated U.S. and Israeli air campaign targeted and assassinated Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, along with other top officials. It was a classic decapitation strike, aimed right at the very head of the Iranian regime.
Iran's retaliation was swift, and it targeted the global economy's jugular vein. They immediately shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that carries about a fifth of the entire world's oil supply. The economic shockwaves were felt instantly everywhere.
The conflict quickly pulled in a whole web of different players. On one side, you had the United States and Israel, and on the other, Iran and its network of proxies, which includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq that are known as the PMF, or the Popular Mobilization Forces. This gives you a clear sense of the main forces involved.
Now, the cost of this month-long war wasn't just measured in tanks and missiles. It was tallied in dollars and, most tragically of all, in human lives.
The economic devastation in the region was just immense. By the end of March, the estimated damage to neighboring Arab nations alone had surpassed $120 billion. That's from a combination of Iranian missiles hitting their infrastructure and the global fuel crisis just taking its toll.
The war also sparked a fierce political firestorm back in the United States, with critics really questioning the administration's reasons for going in. This quote from former Vice President Kamala Harris on April 10th really captures that feeling, framing the conflict as the president's war of choice. It showed a deep divide over whether military action was truly necessary.
And of course, beyond all the economic and political costs, there was the grim human toll. Thousands of people lost their lives. According to human rights groups, the vast majority of deaths were in Iran, with over 3,600 killed. The fighting in Lebanon claimed another 1,800 lives, and you also had dozens of Israeli and American personnel killed in the conflict as well.
Which brings us right back to today. The fighting might have paused, but the core issues that started this whole thing, they are a long, long way from being resolved.
And this really lays out the difficult road ahead. I mean, the future of Iran's nuclear program is still the central question. The war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon is still raging. There's a high risk of retaliatory terrorism. On top of that, the conflict has deeply strained America's alliances, which in turn has created an opening for rivals like China to expand their influence.
So here's the bottom line. Is this ceasefire the beginning of a real, lasting settlement? Or is it just a pause? Are we simply watching the prelude to what one analyst called the war after the war, a new, simmering phase of conflict that could just erupt all over again at any moment? That is the question hanging over the entire world today.